Hello, this is Dr. Bob O, continuing with our philosophy lecture on Metaphysics of East and West, Lecture 11. Well, let's start with round applause. I'm going to have to just do an audio recording at this time because my video recording setup in America temporarily not functioning. I apologize for that. I came back from Cambodia to USA last week, and it's been about 1 week. So I just wanted to see if this audio recording lecture is also as viable. As I continue to mention that my teaching is really want to focus on inspiration and impartation more than information. So let's get on with our lecture 11 as we continue to look at how do we know that we know and talk about the essence of reality. And I promised you last lecture that I was going to share Soren Kierkegaard's philosophy in a poem. And I guess at this point, I'll just share it like this. And I'll create another section where I could read the whole thing and maybe break it down. I think that poem itself should be about 40-minute lecture. So I'm going to just do that next time because we really need to cover Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by Robert Pirsig, which also translates into Korean. And I'll share that in Korean section. We're looking at two things right now. The classical mind, drink some coffee here, and romantic minded. So this is the separation or the way that we look at the reality. And this is the Eurocentric, Western-centric view. And basically, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance is arguing that you need to keep the balance. So when we talk about balance, what is balance? Really? And in the either or world, you really has to be, is it left or is it right? Right? But I challenge you to think otherwise, as using the Soren Kierkegaard's term, is leap of faith. That is the balance. Now, some of you think like, well, how could that be balance? Right? Well, it's because it's always both end. Whoa, that was pretty cool. Let me do that again. It's the darkness and light mingling, water and fire mingling, and it's both end. So in the Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, the narrator, which is Robert Pirsig, is talking about his friend John and Sylvia Sutherland, who represent romantic-minded, emotional, whole, chaos, artistic, whereas he is the classical mind, more of an engineer type, the science, rational, everything in order. So this is off of the real trip they have taken. These are the John and Sylvia Sutherland and their brand new BMW, fancy motorcycle. And he's arguing in the book that Western thought is split in half, and one half is rational, unemotional, and classical mode. So narrator's journey begins at the start of motorcycle road trip. He planned with his son, Chris, and married a couple, John and Sylvia Sutherland. On a philosophical level, the narrator represents the classical mode of thinking, while the Sutherland represent the romantic. Well, what does that mean? Well, because Robert Pirsig, he's a mechanic. He loves the inner working of the motorcycle. He could break it down and put it together and does his own work. He doesn't bring it to dealership like me, but he represents that. So when presented with an engine, for example, a classical mind is fascinated by rich underlying symbols and functions of form that makes machine work. The gears, the bells, the piston, and all the complicated interaction that makes machine what it is. Looking beyond motorcycle maintenance, other example, the classical thinking includes things such as scientific method, logic, and mathematics. So you could tell the classical minded are like that. So you could kind of decide what category do I belong, right? So now I'm thinking about from the Western centric view, right? These fields are underpinned highly systematic, reliable, and rational system. They abide in established set of rules that have been tested and verified. Each new innovation within a system is built upon pre-existing norms, which are themselves built upon the same standard and rules, thus making the classical mode of thought predictable, straightforward, and unemotional. Right? So classical mind these are the 10 points. You could kind of take a picture of that or um, take note on that. Well, ultimately, so what they do is they bring the chaos into order, like that. Categorize and then bring it all to make sense. Okay? The opposite of classical mind is romantic mind, thoughts driven by emotion and creative urges. And so, in contrast to narrator's classical mind, his road trip partners, John and Sylvia Sutherland, represent the romantic mode of thinking. Sutherland refused to learn how to fix their motorcycle on their own, even though it would be as cheaper to do so, or could make them more self-reliant riders, knowing the basics of how the machine functions, right? And this is the classical mind difference between the left brain, right, and the right brain. And we always talk about that. Are you left brain or are you right brain, right? So the right brain is supposed to be artist, musician, creative kind. And we kind of learn to categorize that. And I'm going to try to demystify that. But anyways, yeah, classically people said, Dr. Bob is right brain. He's more artistic. At the same time, wait a minute, but he writes systematic approach to commentary. So what is he? So that's what I'm going to demystify. The chaos. They said that, yeah, the romantic mind embrace chaos. For example, when couple's motorcycle begins to have a problem, the narrator suggests a rough, do-it-yourself solution using a soda can to replace malfunctioning part, an idea that horrifies John, as he would compromise the sleek, romantic aesthetic of the expensive BMW motorcycle. He refused his friend's advice and insists on taking bike in for repairs. That happens in my motorcycle trips, right? So, because I am more of the romantic type. Yeah, I don't fix my bike. I just bring it to dealer and they'll charge $500, $600, $700. But I don't want to touch my stuff because number one, I'm not good at it. So in general, romantics are driven by emotional, inspirational, there you go, creative, imaginative, and intuitive modes of life. Remember how I started my lecture? I said that I want my lecture to be more inspirational, right? Not information, right? So this is the case. The strength of the classical mode are seen as weakness by romantic-minded people. They see human experience as neither predictable nor controllable. Instead, life is full of chaos and emotion. So the romantic mind embraces and is congruent to chaos, where classical-minded is congruent to control. So, in general, romantics are driven by emotional, inspirational, creative, imaginative, intuitive modes of life. The strength of classical modes are the witnessed by romantic-minded people. They see human experience as neither predictable nor controllable. Instead, life is full of chaos and emotion. They forces that classical thinker seems to ignore, attempt to control. Right? To them, it's all about control. So, which is right? Aesthetic versus predictable, aesthetic versus practical. And I'm constantly arguing it's both and, right? Who represent that? Well, it's Stephen Job. Look at that. He was young before. He flunked out of UC Berkeley, went to Stanford, and started learning. And his argument is art and beauty really do matter in the new invention, right? And he kept that promise. Yeah, okay. For you to sleep well at night, the aesthetic, the quality has to be carried all the way through. Wow. So he turned this ugly computer into work of art. He turned into this ugly phone into really iPhone, beautiful work of art. And so think about that. So someone actually already along that line, prior to Steve Jobs, was already talking about that. His name is Korean philosopher, Korean scholar, Korean politician. I mean, Korean everything. He wrote a book called Digilaw. His rap sheet is amazing. The smartest man I know. one of the smartest men I know. He wrote so many books, from novel to poetry to, uh, my goodness. And I read most of his books. He's an amazing man. And he talked about digitalog. Digitalog is digital and analog, right? And he symbolically says that, yeah, the two have merged. And he defines digital minds by nature try to make definition and classification, right? But digital minds, with now critiquing the Western, digital mind make mistake by trying to define and quantify non-numerical entities like life and love. Well, you should not quantify those, right? So from the Eastern perspective, he brings key. Key is one of the opposite. Language is in the middle. Language is more digital than analog, but has more gradation than digital. Wow, this is hard to understand, but you really have to get this, because the reason that we could jump from analog to digital is because the philosophers have decided to write a computer language called Pascal. So he's making that observation. The Eastern perspective, key is in the opposite. Language in the middle. The language makes the digital analog possible, right? So until now, we have to choose between the two. But the post-information era, we are mature enough for the marriage of both, i.e., digital. He wrote that in 70s. It's unbelievable that he actually was able to write. Actually, let me clarify later if he wrote this in the 70s. But the fact that he wrote it, Digilog, I read it, that just blew my mind. This old man was able to understand the embrace. And his argument is that Korea will come ahead in the global electronic market because Korean could really embrace digital and analog simultaneously. Okay? And they have. I mean, just like with Stephen Jobs, the Samsung has conquered the market of phones, and because they are able to work with both digital and analog system, right? Mata Hoshev, what do you think, right? Don't let me tell you what it is. Why don't you think through and argue from your culture? Some of you not be Korean, some of you not be Western, some of you are African, maybe Cambodian, and I'm doing this for my Cambodian friends. And so, as a Cambodian RUPP student who's listening, like Socrates right now, I hope you're listening to this. Uh, what do you think? Uh, well, the Zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance. Let's go back. Zen argues that the dual nature of Faraday's madness now cured haunts the narrator's classical mind. See, during the road trip, the narrator begins to remember and reveal part of his past identity, which he calls Faraday's a madness that was cured after the undergoing electroshock therapy. So he's talking about this ghost or the spirit or the demon that has been hunting him. And if you read the book, it's about how he was a philosopher, was a philosophy student, an English professor, and who struggled with the tension between classical and romantic mode of thought, right? And he was initially studied science, but quickly became disillusioned with his focus on rationality and veneer into the self-certainty, balanced but stressful life. Remember? That's how he felt, like an elephant on a little tiny bowl. How do I balance that? And he had a mental breakdown. In true life is that Robert Pirsig actually goes to Korea as a soldier and learn about Zen and learn about Han, learn about Ki, and then he's trying to incorporate. So it's what I'm sharing is not something totally off the grid. So that's what Robert Pirsig went through in his personal life, and he also had a mental breakdown, because one story that he talks about is when he was grading some student, and some student challenged him, "Who are you? What makes you qualified to evaluate the quality of my work?" And then he basically goes berserk and goes to mental hospital. He has electric, the cure, whatever, and basically he becomes numb. And now it's coming back. And his son, actually, in the story, it's so interesting how son misses his old dad, who was kind of a crazy dad. And also Chris, his son, is also going through a mental issue. So this is very profound novel. And as they trying to balance. What is balance, right? The Pharisees realized that behind each explanation there can always be an infinite number of other possible explanations. Thus, he began to search for other way of understanding the world, right? An infinite number of possibilities. Yet, as he started challenging and questioning existing system of thought, he also began to exhibit increasingly antisocial behavior and even sign of mental illness. It's a sickness. And he checks into hospital. So Theridius was then placed in a mental health institution, prescribed electroshock therapy to cure him of this illness. Wow. Wow. And that's what he went through. So when he awoke many months later, the narrator remembered little of Theridius and his thoughts. He left his teaching position at the university, and he and his wife and son moved away. Wow. And then he decided to write a novel about that. And his journey with Zen and the art of motorcycle was written. According to the narrator, while some people might judge an experience such as Theridius' mental break as an illness that needs to be cured, other cultures might see it differently as a profound period of enlightenment, right? So that's what he realized in the East, that what West calls mental breakdown, mental illness, could be in other culture be called enlightenment. I'm not saying that it is. I'm saying that he says that he could understand it that way. So narrator is torn between fighting Theridius' re-emerging memories and embracing them. The contrast between his view on life and Theridius' perspective creates a tension that builds until the end of the story. Beautiful story. Read that, please. While the narrator seems to bound his classical mind, it soon becomes clear that Theridius had ability to combine both classical and romantic way of thinking, right? Now, I agree with the process in which that he went through for that, but I disagree with his conclusion, right? Quality is a theoretical solution to reconcile divide between classical and romantic. So his argument is that in metaphysical question, what is quality? Well, quality is a solution to reconcile the divide between there's a classical mind going one stream, romantic mind going the other, and quality defines in between. So let's go on. I wonder if it's too fast because I'm not showing my face. I cannot really read. But, well, let me continue at this speed. Maybe you could pause and go back. While studying philosophy, Theridius began to develop his own philosophy, which both caused and would ultimately cure his madness. Theridius believed that the dichotomy of classical versus romantic, so central to Western thought, is responsible for the dissatisfaction, confusion, and lack of wisdom in modern society. Okay? So he's talking about how Sutherland cannot even embrace the fact that I could fix your bike with this beer can. Says no, right? The Pharisees believe that if we are to live in a way that promotes well-being and wisdom, we must find a way to mollify an antagonism between classical and the romantic with concept of quality. Quality is a philosophical approach that includes both the classical and romantic mode of thought. By integrating, now this is the part that I disagree, by integrating the romantic side into the canon of rationalism. No, Robert Persick, you did so well up to this point, but no, we do not integrate the romantic side into the canon of rationalism. No. See, I am suggesting that existential epistemology is both and. It's not integrating, bring one into the one side. It's both sides coexisting, and just like the ethic view has to be in the positivism deductive view, the inductive interpretivism also has emic view. It's both and. That's called existential epistemology, which, man, I don't know if I have time to share this completely, but I'm going to attempt to do that. Well, this is something I share at Royal University, and I, of course, sharing it once, I don't think they got it, Teaching it once, I didn't get it. So now I'm going to teach again. Well, so let's start with existential epistemology. What is that? Theory of knowledge. Well, we need to start with theory of knowledge if you want to learn about how do you know that we know, right? This is one philosopher who said this. Everything that's alive will die. That's how we know something is alive. Wow, was it Aristotle? Oh, did Plato say that? Some RUPP graduate student said that? Everything that's alive will die. That's how we know something is alive. No, it's a first grader, children's hospital, who was sick with disease. At first grade, which means about 7 years old, 6 to 7, well, he realizes profound reality. How does this little kid realize that? Okay. So epistemology, study of knowledge, we learn about a priori, prior to, or posterior to, are used for metaphysics to distinguish two types of knowledge, right? So when we talk about existential epistemology, we're talking about knowing through mind and heart, knowing both in concept and relationship, mind and heart as one. So my argument is that the 7-year-old kid who's facing death, he realized that to be alive is to know death. How does he know that? I'm suggesting he knew that before. It's a priori knowledge, because mind and heart are one thing. They don't separate. See, the romantic mind and classical mind, Western philosophical framework try to divide that. But if you really understand existential epistemology, it's both and, because it's thinking with your heart, thinking with your mind. Okay, and this is interesting. It gets really interesting because neurological block and brain cells in the heart, what they found out is kind of crazy phenomenon. It was actually reported at their scientific journal. This couple spent 30 years of studying heart and heart transplant. So guess what? So this person had a heart transplant from another patient who died, right? I mean, you cannot donate your heart and live. So some guy received a brand new heart from someone else. And so the guy died. And yet the person who received a brand new heart start remembering, like, oh, went to Italy, Milan, and then at Florence, I went to this pizza shop and had this fantastic pizza. And the guy who received the heart start remembering it vividly. Location, name of the restaurant. And he's like, sir, how do I remember this? So they actually contacted, by law, you cannot. So, as a scientific study, they actually contacted the person who died but gave the heart to this patient and realized, and they could actually pinpoint, yes, that's the exact restaurant in Florence that the guy who died went and had pizza. So, wow. So when we talk about mind and heart, because traditionally the Western thought said, no, it's the brain that thinks, brain that has a memory. But that's not what Bible says. Matahoshev, right? He says that be careful how you think. The Proverbs is your heart, from your heart. The reason that we translate think, the word your heart, in Hebrew is a heart, but we said think because in our philosophical framework, heart does not think, right? So we said think, right? Wow, isn't that profound? See, Matahoshev, what do you think? It's not, I am talking about your head, I'm talking about your heart. Because Hebrew mind, your heart is the organ that thinks, right? But we always said, oh, I don't think, I feel. Can you feel my heart, right? And we almost antagonize each. And that's how we are fashioned. So if you're bought into Western thought and you believe that heart and mind is separate, then you said, oh, I don't really think, I feel. And like you make it sound like the brain is against the heart. No, but actually both feeling and thinking is done through heart. This is existential epistemology at its core. I'm arguing both the concept and relationship, knowing in mind and heart is one, right? What are the example of knowing in heart and mind? Okay, how do I know that? Well, from my personal experience early on, just like that, first grader experienced life and he realized what is life, what is to die, what is to live, and he doesn't even understand. No one taught him that. It's a priori. It's some knowledge from within. The heart knew that. Well, look at this. Look at this picture. And I'm going to ask you, give me the title. Mata Hoshep, give me the title of this beautiful work of art. This art is huge. It's like size of like 10 meter by 20. I mean, it's a huge oil painting. Let's say that you walk into museum and you saw this art. Give me the name. How would you title this painting? See, and then it's an actual life. I went with my sister to LA Museum. Edward Hopper work was done, and he's one of his masterpieces in the middle of, and then according to there are small pictures by him, but wow, it was in the middle of it. And I walked in. I was seventh grade, so I was 12. Walked in, and I looked at it. I said, "Wow, hello, sister. That is Sunday morning, right?" And of course, my sister said, "Oh, are you silly? How do you know that?" And so we walked up very close to it, and underneath it all, it says Early Sunday Morning by 1930 by Edward Hopper. Now, how would I come to that conclusion? Because there's a thing called visual imagination. You think through your heart. This example of knowing your mind and heart. Your heart tells you that Sunday morning is based on any kind of data. Did I see that picture before? Of course not. How would I know that? Right? Well, because mind and heart, when it works together, is thinking through intuition, right? I intuit into Edward Hopper's heart. And when Edward Hopper was drawing that picture, you know what he saw? Because when I saw that picture, I start smelling bacon burning and the church bell ringing and little girl shouting, "Mom, where's my dress?" and mom's. I mean, all that was happening. I mean, that's why we appreciate art, right? Um, and it was very peaceful. It was early morning. The sunlight actually tells the sun just rose. From that part of Europe, I guess the shadow has to be forecasted. And some windows are open, some windows are closed, some is halfway open, but some window open, I smell the bacon. It's called visual imagination, right? And so I understood at age 12. Okay. Why? But then the same thing happens. I went to Guatemala. I just finished lecturing at some theological seminary, and I had some free time at city of Guatemala. Beautiful, beautiful city. And I walking through one through art gallery, Guatemalan art gallery, and then I saw this picture, and my heart just stopped. I said, "Oh my goodness, this is another Sunday morning here," you know and color scheme, the shadow, and the expression, and I said, "How much is this?" It's a very small painting. This is actually very small painting. I think it's like 18, I think 18 by 20, very very small. And then they were asking like $800 or something like that. I said, "I don't have that kind of money." I have like at the time, because the Bible college gave me like $400 for my teaching, so I had that in my cash, $400 in my wallet, and I said I only have 400. I want to buy it. Who drew this? Oswald Cercardo. I said call the painter because I really really need it. It was year 2007. I said I need it, and I talked to the painter, and he graciously approved, and I got it. I had it in my living room, my study now. And guess what? After he talked to me, he passed away next year, right? And so, oh my goodness, his paintings now. He drew that 2007, and all his paintings, starts at 3,500. I mean, beautiful work of art, right? And I have that frame, and I have it in my desk. And I'm not bragging about money I made. That's the whole missing the point. Okay. The point is that the artist has been trying to communicate through their art. I mean, this is one of my example. Went to Cyprus, Paphos, and departing mythologies, and there's beautiful paintings. What are they trying to say, right? What are they trying to do? And if you only see naked men and naked women, well, then you're missing the point, aren't you? Right? And so, yeah, so I visit museums, art galleries, because I'm imagining possibility, right? What are they saying? Well, for Khmer people, I I fell in love with Kao Tusia's work. I befriended him. We became good friends, and all of his work before, his work, in Khmer places, they're selling all this beautiful work for like $150. I said, no, it's worth more than that. So I start collecting, and then I start charging 1,500. At the time when they're selling 150. Now his work is in Singapore, the galleries, and his work is now being recognized. So my point, wow, I was able to do it in 32 minutes. That's good. My point is that when we understand, just like Yeoryang, the philosopher from Korea, the author of Digilogue, said, we make a great error. We create this system that even trying to appreciate life and try to quantify it, then we're going to create problems. Just like Stephen Job, who was able to make a jump and says, no, this electronic is not, it should not be created by mechanics or the engineers, because they don't understand beauty. The aesthetic is devalued. And so the Mac came up with, no, it has to function, but it has to be fashionable. It's both and. So he's embracing both and philosophy. Digilogue is embracing both. And Robert Pirsig is saying that classical mind and romantic mind. And he made a fundamental error, though. He said the romantic mind has to be integrated into canon of rationalism, or the classical mind, which I disagree. I'm saying that the epistemological, the existential epistemology has to embrace both. Phew, that was pretty heavy stuff. I'm not showing my face, so I don't know how clearly I'm communicating, because you should be able to see my face. So maybe I could set up my studio so you could see my face as I share this. But please, if you have some comment, would you let me know? Because I don't know if this way is better or the other way. So I think it's got to be both, because I'm just doing through, and I'm not showing my face, so I don't know if I'm communicating clearly. So anyways, well, please subscribe. Please ring the bell, so if lecture 12 comes on, that you'll be informed. Okay, Lord bless. Thank you.